Welcome to GFW Thinks. Today we're going to be discussing prefixes or prefixes. We're going to be discussing those little words you have before your title. Mr., Mrs., Ms. Where does it all come from? And what do we at GFW think about it? Well, you're going to find out. I have with me my panel of experts, Lisa, Christine, and Nell. So, prefixes, prefixes, what do we think?
Well,
do we like it?
First of all, are you a miss or a ms?
Personally, I like to be a ms, but it feels a little bit weird.
I'm a ms. Go on.
Well, I was a ms, and now I identify as a Mrs.
Oh.
And I don't know if I'm challenging the Mrs. over the ownership of being under the control of a Mr.
Ah.
I grew up really resenting the prefix ms because my mum used it and everything my mum did I hated. So I go by miss.
Miss, for me, almost seems a little bit pejorative. It's like small, little. I mean, these are all meanings that I've added to it, but I feel like it's a little bit, society kind of adds that to it.
Well,
miss.
aren't
It's not a hit, is it?
Little girls are miss, aren't they?
Yeah. Juvenile.
And unmarried women are
Absolutely.
miss.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a bit too old for miss.
Definitely.
But for boys,
Cheeky.
they used to be master, and then they became Mr. But my son, was getting letters from the age of 7 to Mr. So he actually had more importance than I did.
But even as a youngster, being male, who gets master or master, that's already an elevation.
Yeah.
Master is,
Elevation of
a
status.
status word, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's right. And miss, I think, I find it, I definitely find it belittles, whereas master, gives you some sort of grandiosity about you.
Nice word.
I like being masterful as a woman. You can keep miss throughout your life. And spinster has a very negative connotation, whereas bachelor has a rather glamorous
Cliff
pipe
Richard.
smoking. Maybe not so much Cliff Richard.
Richard style.
Maybe we'll steer away from Cliff. But there's something rather dapper about the idea of a bachelor, whereas a spinster,
I'm
kind
quite
of
looking forward to being a spinster.
No,
alright.
you'll never be a spinster.
I don't know.
No.
Getting there.
I think it's a question of changing the connotation around it. So spin the spinster into being something more positive. Because
It'd
spinster,
be like on the decks.
Well,
like
Cinderella.
Wow, that's it. Your DJ prefix.
Spin-
there you go.
Yeah.
I'm a spinster. What do? I get the vinyl out, baby.
Yeah.
Like that.
Where do we think Mrs. came from? And where did Miss come from? Do you know?
Well, my understanding is Mrs. within the 3 letters, you have Mr. And therefore, if you're a Mrs., you are in the ownership of a Mr.
Interesting.
Because it's
Very
in there.
interesting. Yeah, so I don't like the
It's
idea
an
of that.
identifier of being married to
You're married to
mister.
a
Absolutely.
man.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I now chose to be known as Mrs. because I'm now in a civil partnership. And I don't know if that's in a rebellious way as to, well, it doesn't really matter what sex you are, what you identify as, but I kind of like that way because for me, it completes.
Well, you're saying that you are in a partnership, so
Yes.
in that sense, Mrs. has been
And you want to
reclaimed.
identify
Yeah.
that you're not single
Yes.
through your title.
Yes.
But you're not married to a man.
Yes.
So for you, Mrs. means in a partnership.
In a partnership. Yeah.
Whereas traditionally it hasn't. It's the suffix to being with a man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it doesn't really work in the modern times as a word, but you flipped it on its head and you're keeping it anyway.
It's good. It's subverting it, isn't it? I think in
Yeah.
that context. And then generally that would move into the whole society will perhaps perceive it that way.
Yeah.
Being a Mrs., the patronising sales calls asking whether your husband might be interested.
Yes. Yeah. Does
Well,
that
Have
still
you ever
happen?
had that?
What I get is, and your name, are you Miss, Mrs. or Ms? And I go, I am Mrs. And then they say, okay,
your
what does your
husband?
husband do?
Yes.
Oh.
That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
get.
yeah.
What does your
Outrageous.
husband do?
And what do you say?
I wouldn't know.
She-
I don't have one.
She does this, that. and
Okay,
that.
and if you were
My wife is blah, blah, blah.
misters in a civil partnership,
Yeah.
you don't have any way of indicating that you're married. And men, so historically, any male prefixes don't have of taken to them.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah.
But then what it also doesn't do is to continue the conversation. Who are you? Mr. blah, blah, blah. End of.
Yeah.
End of. That's it. You're just a Mr. You're Mr.
You're not
It's
identified by having a significant other or...
There's this quite new prefix MX. How do we even say that?
Yeah, interesting.
I asked this question. I got a mix.
Mix. Okay.
Mix.
Mix.
But we could be, I think that, and the idea that there's a mix,
Yeah, okay.
or that it's a fluid
Well,
title.
it means that men can use it too, which
Yeah.
is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know how many people have adopted it, but the concept
we
is
can use
great.
it.
The concept is great. I think the problem that we would have is some people would just see it as a spelling mistake.
That's also true.
Well, then it's time to, to write to the utility companies, write to your bank, and
Yeah.
demand that they put mix on the drop-down menu.
Absolutely.
Interestingly enough, did you know Metro Bank have recently been the first bank to introduce MX in their drop-down menus, which I think is rather forward-thinking.
I wonder whether people would choose to move their banking on the back of that. They might, I guess.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Feel quite strongly about having that option.
Yeah, and I think
Or-
most people who decide to take MX as their prefix would feel strongly about it if they feel
absolutely.
strongly enough to do that.
But it's your influence as well, isn't it? Because sometimes what happens is if one particular company decides to go down that sort of avenue, and then if there's a bit more of a push back from the public into their own banks or different companies and whatnot, then it's to say, actually, I like that down. I want to be known as a mix.
Good for Metro Bank. No, fantastic. Also, other titles. So, professional titles, like, if I were a professor, I would love to be Prof. Kate.
You can
Or-
Prof. Kate.
Well, thank you. I think I rather like
Doctor?
that. Doctor, I would like that.
But
Dr. Kate, yeah.
you can be a doctor as a medical profession and a doctor with your doctorate,
Your
can't you?
PhD.
That's
Yeah.
true.
You can.
That's true.
Yeah.
Captain.
Captain Kate,
You would
yes.
really
Captain
feel like
Kate.
you have to do this with your hat, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Captain.
Doffing.
Captain Christine.
But
Oh,
all these,
yeah.
Alliteration and everything.
I like it.
they're all meaning status, aren't they? Colonel,
Yes.
professor.
Yeah.
So maybe we should have other new prefixes. What can
Yes.
we think of? Like
Sparkle.
Sparkle.
I could be sparkle.
What for? What's it indicating about
It's
you? That you
indicating-
Professional
sparkle.
fairy?
Well, all right. In a pre-life, I might have been a fairy. But I like, why can't you use something that's a bit more colourful?
Or one of these, like a modern profession, like a vlogger or a
Yeah.
blogger or a
You could have BL.
Blue.
BLG,
Blah.
but then people might think you're building.
Yeah.
So BL Nell. That's
Yeah.
BL.
But then how do you say that?
Blue.
That's what GFW thinks. But more importantly, what do you think? We want to hear your comments. Write them below in the comments box. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get involved. We love that. And we love you buying our shirts because they're very marvellous. Please do. Thanks for watching. Bye.
See my tailor, she's called Nell. I know it's going to